we called the series "What is Life?" So, what is life? Here,
Well,
Michelle and Shannon.
And I understand with people in Europe, there are some storms coming through. You all remember last time, when my computer, there was a bit of a power surge and the power flickered, and then it took me about 10 minutes to get back online. So if that happens again, we'll all just relax and don't worry about that. But I think I may have actually told you, some of you that have been on these podcasts in the past year, there were a couple different experiences when Andrew, my husband, was at the end of his life. I remember one time we were looking for one particular doctor's office in a big hotel complex, and we took a wrong turn, and we ended up in the birthing center. And there were all of these wonderful environments, and it was all lots of happy people and lots of supportive people. And we talked about the idea of a doula, somebody who really understood the process very well and been through it many times, understood what giving birth was like, and also all of the the legalities and all of the red tape and things you had to fill out, and someone who could help you through this process so that you didn't have to really be afraid. But I remember certainly turning to my husband and saying, why isn't there a death center? I mean, why isn't there somewhere where people can go and be very well supported? And as I mentioned it at NIH, I felt very, very well taken care of. We were there actually during the height of the pandemic, so most of the people at NIH were not physically at center, and they did have a few people who were serving as counselors, people from different religious traditions. There was somebody that came by who was from Catholicism. There was somebody who was more, I think, from the Methodist tradition. And I did actually ask, is there anybody who could come by and talk to us who's a Buddhist? And they unfortunately said that there was nobody there at the time, physically there. And the reason I had asked for that, although I'm not a Buddhist, I don't really belong to any religious tradition. A lot of what I had known about Buddhism and the sense of, how do you allow yourself to love something so much, but something that is impermanent? A person, a lover, a partner, even life itself. How do these different religious traditions deal with this? Because one thing that Andrew and I didn't really want to hear from the different religious traditions was that death wasn't real, that we were going to meet again in the same way. Basically just ignore all this, it's not really real. And so I felt that Buddhists had perhaps a better way of dealing with this. And I've spent a decent amount of time in the Himalayas. I love traveling to Bhutan. And I was actually going to be in Nepal this spring, except for COVID. And so Shannon is not only a Buddhist nun, but she is also an oncology nurse, and she bridges these two traditions. So I have not had a chance to talk to Shannon at length before, so this is my first time too, and I'm really looking forward to learning from her. So well, Shannon, first of all, tell us about this interesting, this interesting dovetailing of two traditions. You've been trained in Western medicine, an oncology nurse, but also you have this tradition in Himalayan Buddhism. To tell us a bit about how this began and where this has taken your career.
Yeah, I was always, I think, from a very young age, searching for something meaningful. I just always had a sense that the value in my life would come through finding a way to serve others. And so through trying a lot of paths, I ended up in Tibetan Buddhism, and it just really resonated with me for a lot of reasons. And at the same time, I couldn't, as a young person, imagine myself sitting away in a cave or in a convent meditating all the time. I felt like there's just so much suffering in the world, and I want to actively be involved in helping others. And so I actually went on the two paths together, and I believe I graduated from nursing school, became ordained the next day, and then started work, I think, a day or two later. And so from the beginning, I've sort of been on these two tracks, which has been amazing because the one has informed the other and vice versa. Yeah.
And what was it about Tibetan Buddhism that really resonated with you personally?
Buddhism was what resonated me. I think there were a few things that I knew about it. I knew that it was a religion that didn't believe in violence or war or forcibly trying to convert others, which made a lot of sense to me. I was brought up in a Christian tradition, but that made sense to me, you know, and the in Buddhism, there's really a focus internally. You know, it's about if you see something in the world, uh, a situation or a person or anything that bothers you, instead of lashing out and blaming, you look inside. Sort of the idea that everything that we experience in our lives is really a reflection of our own minds. And so if we want to change the world, we need to turn inward and change ourselves. And that just really resonated with me. Yeah.
Now, have you helped people? Have you been involved, in helping people deal with the end of life and deal with their coming deaths?
I, in most of my career as an oncology nurse, I was an inpatient nurse at the bedside for probably 25 years or so. And so, yes, I've had a lot of patients who have gone through the end stages with me, and I've been present at many deaths. And I think surreptitiously, because the last thing I want to do is push my beliefs on somebody else. I don't think that's at all helpful. Um, but yeah, the thing that struck me so often was the the isolation that patients and families would feel. And I would see the same thing over and over again, where the family and the patient would all be together and everybody's putting on that brave face and it's okay and just eat another bite and blah, blah, blah. And nobody would talk about what was really happening. And not the family, not the patient, oftentimes not the doctor. And then the family leaves at the end of the day, and there's this complete transformation of the person left sitting there, and this pain and isolation and fear. And so yeah, when I've had an opportunity and it felt right, I would jump in and speak with them, and sometimes just asking them, what, where do you think you are and what do you want now, to give them a chance. And similarly for families, when a patient was actively dying, there's such a feeling of helplessness, and profound grief. And so often in my career, I've sort of helped family members to be a part of it. Like, let's set aside your grief for now. It's valid and it's there, but let's help your loved one now because they need you and you can be of benefit. And so telling them, maybe to let the person know that you'll be okay, that it's okay for them to go. I think that's really important. And supporting them with kind thoughts and it gives family members a sense of control, I think, and something a little, something different from just the overwhelming grief. And yeah.
So how do you feel? I mean, how does Buddhism approach the idea of death and impermanence? I mean, and like you said, the idea of suffering. I mean, somebody just put in the chat, I think, a quote from the Buddha, right? That you only lose what you cling to. Somebody had put in that chat. Perhaps we can talk about that in the second part, about what that might mean. But tell us how Buddhism might help us to deal with this passage.
We, right. The concept of impermanence is a big one for Buddhists. We actually have daily contemplations, and that's one of the contemplations every day. We think about everything everything that rises will fall, and everything we gain will we lose, and everyone close to us. And we just, it's sort of the idea, along with the person who put in that quote, it's not that having things or having loved ones is the problem, it's that intense grasping to it that ultimately leads to our suffering. And so we, from the very start of our journey on the spiritual path, sort of befriend the idea of death and impermanence. And we actually plan for our deaths, rather than denying and fearing. We think, no, we believe that we go on either hopefully to enlightenment, but if not, to rebirths, and we want better rebirths where we can continue our work. And so a lot of it for Buddhists is really, what state of mind do I want to be in at the time of death? We don't want, as Buddhists, to be in a state where we're overwhelmed with fear or anger or regrets. So we try to work on those things now. How do I live my life in such a way that I don't have a lot of regrets, that I can kind of pacify my anger? How can I die and approach my death in a space where my mind is really stable and calm, and maybe even like eyes wide open, like, okay, where am I going to go next? And how can the training I've had as a Buddhist help me to navigate where I go next? So I'm actually a participant in the process. Yeah.
That was something that was very important for us. When my husband died, you talked about the feeling of powerlessness. And one of the things that I had really tried to do to make his death as much as I could kind of a wonderful thing, was this idea that you and I are doing this together. This is something every human being, every life is going to do, and and it's an active. I mean, not active in the sense of of actively ending your life, but as he was dying, just all of that positive. This has been wonderful. We've had an incredible life, and I'm going to go on. I'm going to be strong. I'm going to be happy. I'm going to grieve the hell out of you. But just this idea that we're doing this together. And even in the part when he was dying, it's like, don't fight it. Let this happen. This is good. Be active in, it's time to go. And that is it's painful, but it's painful in kind of a beautiful way. It's not painful in a powerless violation. It's not that. It's a different sort of pain. And we talked about this idea of death doulas, about the idea of the birth. And now this is something that you're becoming involved in. Is that right?
Right. So yeah, I love what I do. I love nursing, and I do like traditional conventional medicine, but I also recognize that there's a big component missing, and people very often at the end of life, doctors don't struggle with patients dying. It's a failure for them. And so oftentimes, the model is to push, and fight. And what can happen so often then is you just get swept up in this kind of machine, and often there isn't space. And even personally with, the deaths of my own parents, I saw that. I got caught up, and they were in hospice, but you just get caught up in the busyness and the mechanics and this and that, and don't always have the space to step back and ask, how do we want this to play out? And so I decided to study as a death doula. And so I'm just in the beginnings of that. And if I can share one story that I got from my class that I thought was so beautiful. One of the things that death doulas can help people with, and you've probably discussed this in your program, is in creating a vigil at the end of life. What does the person who's dying want that time to look like? And we can't always guarantee, but to try. And so this was a story of a Croatian woman who was dying of heart disease. And she had immigrated here in her 20s and never married, but had a large and close circle of friends, and was very grateful for the opportunity she had in this country. And so the plan that she and her end of life doula created is she wanted anyone who came to visit her, there was a chair outside of her door, and she asked that people sit for a few minutes and just contemplate gratitude, because that was so important to her. Gratitude for their friendship, for this time they would have together now, whatever. And then she helped give people direction when they came in, because that's uncomfortable often. How do I act and what do I say? And so she told people, I want you to feel free to say whatever you want. If there's any unfinished business, please say it. Talk about what you want. Sit quietly if you like. She had music that she liked, and she said, if you'd like to play the music. She had books of poetry that she loved. If you'd like to read me poetry. So she, in her way that she was living of nurturing, she passed that on to help her friends. And she had a death scroll at her bedside and invited everyone who came to see her to write something on the death scroll about them. And then also for people who felt comfortable, she was comfortable with her body. Once she passed, anyone who wanted to wash her body and prepare it was invited to do so. And then she had the death scroll laid out over top of her, of her life. And in the end, she had saved some very special Croatian wine, and she asked her friends to come together and drink the wine and toast and share stories. And I thought, it's so beautiful. And we often think of, well, either you go down the aggressive medical treatment line or you go to hospice. But I realized in that story that could have transpired anywhere. I don't necessarily think it's an either or, but how many people know that they could do that, that they could say, this is what is important to me. And so that just really opened my eyes. And I think it could create this really profound and beautiful time, even in the midst of sorrow.
It's a beautiful story. I really love that. Yeah. And that's, like I said, that was sort of part of our journey that we did for a while, try very aggressive medical help. I mean, that's why we were at NIH, we were trying experimental treatments and all of that. But when soon it became apparent fairly quickly that it wasn't going to stop the cancer. But through the whole thing, there's this idea of journey and beauty of the process. I mean, when I heard that my husband was going to die of cancer, the first thing was fear. How much is he going to be in pain? How horrible is this going to be? And and one of the things I've been telling people, and I know this varies hugely, but but with the medical help and the pain management and all of the things that we got, it wasn't horrible. I mean, I'm so sorry he had to suffer at all, and I still cry a lot about that. But it wasn't something to be so scared of. And I think that's a thing. I mean, I've never given birth, and I would imagine that that might be a very frightening thing to face. And that's part of the role of a doula, is to say, there are parts of this that are very difficult, but there are also wonderful parts of this. And people just don't seem to understand. Death can be thought of that same way, as things that are necessarily difficult, but it can also be beautiful.
Right, right. And I know, even as a Buddhist, we have these ideals that we aspire to, but it's hard. And I remember when my mother died first, and then my father was dying. And I had a lot of fear about that, because we know the world with our parents in it, and the idea of him being gone. And I thought, how will I ever do this? How will I ever survive? And I think one of the beautiful things is you realize that you have strength in you that maybe you hadn't tapped into in a certain way before, and that you can deal even amidst the pain. And that, yeah, that the things that we fear are not necessarily going to play out. And I can say that as an oncology nurse, and having watched many people die, I'm not that part I'm not actually so afraid of, the pain or what might come, because I think there's a lot we can do to deal with. Um, and if we can remember, up until very recently, I think, in 1945, most people still died at home. For thousands of years, that's what people did, surrounded by family. And so people knew that cycle of life, and death and rebirth, or death and birth, or whatever. It was just a natural part of life, very much like people who lived in rural areas and farms. You see the same thing in nature. And I think, unfortunately, part of advances in medicine, and just the rising of urban living and all of that, we've sort of cut ourselves off from that really, I think, special, part of our place in nature, and in this bigger, universe, in this cycle of everything, is born and grows and blossoms and decays and dies, and just comes again. And if we can remember some of that and bring that sacredness back in to death, I think it could be really transforming for everyone.
I know, in the Buddhist tradition, and there are many, of course, different things. When I lived in California, I lived fairly close to the Tassajara Zen Center, which is in California, was founded by a man from Japan who was a practitioner of Zen Buddhism. And I got one of his books, about the beginner's mind, and I was reading something about the Zen tradition. Part of it was his biography, and I was surprised to learn that he came to the United States, and he founded the Zen Center. he then fell in love with a jazz musician, a woman who was a jazz musician, and got married. And I was like, oh, I didn't realize that was part of what a Zen priest could do. So the idea of passionate love, and connectedness is not, it's not seen as a contradiction to the idea of detachment. And how do Buddhists work that out? Because that's a problem in my life. I love very intensely, but I'm also trying to maintain this idea that I have to be somehow comfortable with the impermanence of everything.
Right. Yeah, I think it's different for monks and nuns in our tradition. We don't marry. So we are really trying on a sort of a different way to practice renunciation. But yeah, again, it's not so much the loving, because love is amazing, and if we had more of that in the world, it would be a different world. But it's our grasping, and I don't want to get all heavy into Buddhist philosophy, but where it's problematic is that for Buddhists, we believe that the suffering and the grasping comes from this erroneous belief in this separate self, that our lives are really almost more like a dream, or like a bubble or something, that our true nature is this primordially pure, grounded being that is free from separation and free from attachment, and luminous and wakeful. And so as Buddhists, that's what we're trying to get to. So being in a relationship and expressing love is not the problem, it's the not recognizing our true nature that really is where the suffering comes from. And so we have in our community a number of couples, of married couples, who are on the path together. And so they're studying that, and they love each other, but at the same time they contemplate, what is my true nature, and how am I not separate from everything else? And so I think that helps to kind of loosen that, fearful attachment, maybe, is.
I really love that. I'm working with a grief counselor, and we've talked about this, about fearful attachment. And and although she's not necessarily coming at this, she's coming at this from a therapy perspective. But the emphasis keeps, she never lets me make it external. It's like, that feeling you have of needing to connect, to the loneliness. She's like, bring it back into you, because there's something in there, in yourself, that can deal with that. And I love what you talked about how inside us is this part of us that's not lonely, that's not separate and disconnected. And we somehow need to find that. And that's something that I'm on the path right now. And I think it's a beautiful idea.
I remember years ago, I don't remember who, somebody created a book of photographs of people on the streets of New York City. And he asked them each the question of what's the most important thing you've ever learned in life, something to that effect. And this older woman, he asked, with her picture, and she said when her husband was dying, she was so distraught. And she said, how will I ever live without you? I can't imagine. And he said, you take all the love you have for me and you share that love with everyone else. And to me, that was so beautiful, is we have this gift inside, and we can completely turn that around. And I think that's a lot of what you're doing with this show. You're taking that pain and you're transforming it, and sharing with others and helping others. And that's so precious. Yeah.
I agree with you that I think that it's hard to imagine life having, a meaning for me unless I wasn't trying to help people, and also learning to receive help, also learning to let people help you. That can be very difficult as well. So that's just some wonderful ideas. Just asking. I mean, Felix, we've come up on the half an hour. Would you like us to wrap the discussion up, or?
Well, my ears are glued to what you're talking about, and my eyes are glued on the chat, because there's so many thoughtful, heartbreaking, emotional things happening that I would love to reflect on with you. And as always, when we spend these hours together, I'm at a loss of words. I feel like I can't continue hosting because I don't know what to say. And then I realize that's actually why we're doing this, because we are having a conversation that is is not an everyday conversation, that it's hard to have, that a lot of people don't have, as you both pointed out. And I would just want to thank everybody for sharing here in the chat. This is absolutely, this community is such a gift, and this conversation is. And to give you all a moment to return to your inner selves and your inner journey, I now invite Karis to the stage. Shannon, you are so blessed by having meditation around you on this day. For many of us, this is the moment where we get to enjoy it here on Remote Daily. So we're connecting these two worlds right now. And our meditation guide is here to help us from her home to yours. Here's Karis Timo.
Thank you, Felix. All right, before we find stillness, let's move a little bit. Let's do a few shoulder rolls. Inhale the shoulders up. Exhale down your back. Inhale up. Exhale, release down your back one more time. Beautiful. This time as you inhale your shoulders up, take them to the front. Opposite direction, and maybe connecting your breath with the movement, making any other little movements that might feel good right now. So you tune into your body, tune into your breath. The next time your shoulders settle down your back, just rest the palms face down or up on your knees or thighs. And then closing your eyes and settling your entire body into stillness. Without forcing or trying to control your breath, just become aware of your breath at your nostrils. Notice your inhales and notice your exhales. And then beginning to equalize our breath, mentally counting for 3. So on your next inhale, mentally counting for 3, 2, 1. Brief pause, and then exhale for 3, 2, 1. Brief pause. Inhaling for 3, 2, 1. Brief pause. And exhale for 3, 2, 1. Take another round on your own, going at your own pace. After that last exhale, just settling into stillness. The breath is natural, the breath is effortless. You are still, you are stable. I want you to take a moment and bring this mantra, this intention to mind. I trust the process of life. I trust the process of life. And just mentally repeat that 3 times to yourself now. Letting that go. And I want you to bring to mind one word with how you would like to feel now, how you'd like to feel for the rest of the week, this weekend. Bring that word to mind. Repeat it to yourself and see yourself feeling, embodying that word. Beautiful. Take a nice deep inhale through your nose, filling your entire body with breath. Your lungs expand with breath. And as you exhale, slowly release from your mouth. Sigh it out. Let it go. Bringing movement back into the body, maybe moving your fingertips, your toes. Bringing a smile to your face and sharing your beautiful smile with everyone here today. Opening your eyes if your eyes are closed. And thank you all for taking time to breathe. Back to you, Felix.
Thank you so very much, Karis. And of course, Dario, the music you heard was live as well. This is Remote Daily, and I invite you all to grab whatever's next to your screen after working out to hydrate. Cheers. This is my toast to you, Yvonne, Sarah, Robert, Pamela, Miriam, Kyoko, Karis, John, Jolie, John Patton, Jenny, Eleanor, Dario, Sabine, Deborah, Daniel, Anne, Amanda, and of course, Shannon, Michelle, our guests today. Sammy, all out there on LinkedIn, cheers. Welcome to Remote Daily. And Shannon, we have a Remote Daily house song. It never sounds the same. We give it as a little tiny souvenir to all our guests. And here it is for you, and of course for Michelle.
This is Remote Daily, your daily dose of inspiration. This is Remote Daily, an oasis of innovation for your mind, your soul, and your heart. Connect, act, and recharge with Remote Daily. This is Remote Daily.
Ian D, Elena, and Dario, thank you so very much. I think this was an ode to Buddhism and to our guests here today on the Remote Daily stage for the second half of this conversation. I'll pass the mic back with gratitude to Shannon and Michelle.
Well, I know that, we had talked about maybe for the second half, you mentioned there was a lot of, wonderful conversation in the chat. And, perhaps Felix, you could help me call on some people who might like to ask Shannon something, to contribute something to our discussion. So are there people, maybe should we have people raise hands, or how would you like to do it?
I have one person here. I just read her post in the chat. I know she is in the same field as Shannon is. And I know that she is here to talk because she always has some of the most beautiful and powerful comments on any session that you're a part of, Michelle. So hi, Amanda, welcome back.
Hi. Yeah, that was absolutely beautiful. And Shannon, I have to say, I have quite a lot of respect for you, especially being in oncology for so long. That was actually like my very first hospital position was in oncology floor in the hospital. And I was really young. I was like 22, 23, just like fresh out of school. But I found myself very afraid a lot of the time. And I found that both the nurses and the doctors, and I'm still seeing this now, even in ICU, that, we are so afraid to talk about it. And I see that in our patients. It's like, of all the people that should be comfortable with talking about it, it should be us. We should be unafraid to talk about this with them, even though I think for us, it's born out of a place of like not wanting to say the wrong thing or something like that. But I definitely think, like, hearing everything you said, this is something that we need to be doing in the ICU now in hospitals, because I do see these patients and they are very isolated and lonely. And I don't think it should be that way. But the one thing I did want to ask was it Buddhism that helped you to confront all of this and confront these fears and be able to just be at almost like at this peace and this just sort of calmness with confronting like some of the scariest things that people can imagine?
Yeah, thank you, Amanda. Uh, wow, yeah, in the ICU, that's tough. um, yeah, I definitely think for me it was Buddhism that sent me on this path. I don't know that I had really thought much about death prior to becoming a Buddhist. I became ordained when I was 27, you know. But yeah, we approach it eyes wide open, and we talk very much about it, and in really interesting ways. Some of our Buddhist teachers, you know, there actually is a book called the Tibetan Book of the Dead, which is very Buddhist and difficult to read, but it actually goes through the stages that one would go through, you know, in that active dying process that you've probably seen over and over again, the modeling and the breathing issues and all that. And they talk about it as the dissolution of elements, one element dissolving into another, eventually dissolving into space, and the consciousness really at the moment of death, what we consider death, as you know, Western people, Buddhists believe that there's still a subtle inner breath that continues for a short time afterwards. And then there's this amazing opportunity and experiences that come up where one could actually, if you've worked a little on meditation with your mind and all, actually recognize your primordial wisdom nature at that moment. So not only is it not something to be afraid of, it's something to really prepare for, because it could be like the most important moment of your entire life right then and there. And so teachers will give these very funny you know, bits to us, you know, like sometimes people, if they die suddenly or die in their sleep, for example, they often don't know for a while that they're dead. It takes some time to figure that out. And so we had a teacher come one time, and he was talking about something, and then he got on this subject, and he's like, yeah, so, you know, if you find that you're not casting a shadow, then you know you're dead. Say to yourself, I must be dead. Or if you step in water and then onto land and there's no wet, then you recognize now you're dead. And so everybody just honed in. So it's not really scary, but wow, oh, okay. Like it's kind of empowering. Like, oh, these are some of the things that I might come across. And this is how I can have some control and direct what happens. And then it becomes, yeah, it becomes kind of like a friend you're waiting to meet or something. Or yeah, it's a very different feeling to it. And we don't shy away. We tell people when they're dying, a Buddhist would say, now you're dying, get your mind focused, and we're going to sit here and meditate with you, or we'll do some mantra with you, and we're there supporting the person, and it's beautiful. It's not really frightening. So
I had heard about this death practice, and I mean, approaching it as a scientist, you know, one of the things that Andrew and I prepared for and we talked about was that there has been scientific evidence that the brain is active after death for a little while, like you said. I mean, I think in the science it may be as long as like 15 or 20 minutes. And that they had, you know, some of these MRI studies sort of suggested that somebody might know that they're dead, you know, inside this. And of course, we don't have the opportunity then to ask them, you know, how it felt, you know, because they die. You know, that this may be part of what near-death experiences are. But Andrew and I sort of prepared for it with a piece of beautiful music that when he was declared dead, when his breathing had stopped and his pulse had stopped, I put, you know, headphones on him, and we played Spem and Allium by Thomas Tallis, which Andrew had really loved in life. And, you know, and now, of course, makes me cry every time I hear it. But the idea was we wanted something pleasant, if possible, if any of his senses, I mean, maybe hearing wasn't working either, but we just didn't know. And so we wanted to talk about that and have something ready for right after death. That's, I mean, and so this interesting idea that this may be this amazing moment of clarity at the end.
Right. And the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying, or the Tibetan Book of the Dead, excuse me, is actually something one can read to prepare, but also is often read aloud to the person. And there's a shorter version called the Tibetan Book for Reading Aloud that's geared more for Westerners, and it's really beautiful. Like, the time has come for you to set out. You have died. You can't stay here anymore. Death has happened. It happens to everyone. Now, you know, turn your mind. And it's really beautiful and poetic. And we completely believe that that the person, and I had always heard that consciousness is, it's about as long as it takes to eat a meal. So that's probably about right, 15 or 20 minutes. That is the most profound opportunity for somebody if they know and can prepare a little bit. And it sounds like you did. And that's wonderful.
And like I said, we were sort of approaching this from the science of it, that there had been some evidence of this. But, you know, again, this idea of a birth, right? The doula, right? The doula is there to help you through this. And, you know, perhaps even after you are classically declared dead, you know, there is someone there to hold your hand, and you know who's going to be with you through that. Yeah, that's powerful. Yeah. There's so many wonderful comments here. I mean, John, you seem to have a lot to say about Buddhism. John Patton, is there anything you'd like to contribute to the discussion here, or you can also just, you've been reading some of what you've been writing.
Hello. You know, it's tough for me. My well, I can't really talk about it, but my mother passed away in May, so I've been kind of getting through that. So.
And has reading some of this, has reading some of this Buddhist philosophy helped you? You've been quoting a lot. Yeah.
No, what's amazing is, right, Felix is bringing you onto this show. Actually kind of predated that. So it's been a very interesting, because I went through the whole hospice thing and all that stuff. So, yeah, it's very interesting. But I'm not talking about it yet. Still getting there. I'm not as good as you at that. I'm amazed at your ability to process this activity, this thing that people go through, that everybody goes through, and to bring it out for everyone else to experience is really amazing, Michelle. So I appreciate that.
Thank you, John. Thank you. And please know I'm going to be thinking about you. I mean, I mean, this is going to be, you know, it's a difficult time. I'm still finding my way through it. You know, things do change. I mean, I have noticed that I am changing, and I'm able to be, you know, happy again and things like that. But I'm still trying to figure out how my life is going to look without this person. I just don't know. Yeah. So just know that you're not alone. We're all in there with you.
Yep. And I take great comfort that Einstein agreed with us about Buddhism, so that's good.
Yeah. I saw your quote about this idea that Einstein had, that a future idea of religion, you know, would be a much more cosmic view of whatever people want to define as God. Yeah, absolutely. Is there anybody else who'd like to contribute with you know, hands up or anything? Something people would like to say? And if not, I have plenty of questions. So, but please, Felix, if you see anybody who would like to contribute something to the discussion, please let me know.
Hi, Yvonne.
Hi. I do have a question, Shannon. I have a friend who is also studying to become a death doula. And when he first told me about it, I had never heard of the term before. And since then, it's kind of like knowing somebody with a certain car. You start to see that car everywhere. I'm wondering if this is a fairly new phenomena in the West, or if it's just, you know, Western, or if it's everywhere. And wondering, you know, is this an awakening that we see the need for this, and it's starting to become a thing? Because I have heard it from more than one person that they were considering becoming a death doula. It's about 5 different people, you know.
Right. Yeah. Thank you, Yvonne. That's a great question. And actually, it's fairly new. I think maybe 20 years or so since the end-of-life doula concept came up. And actually, I forget the gentleman's name, and I should remember because I trained with him. But anyway, the man who created the whole idea of an end-of-life doula was he is a Zen Buddhist and was himself a hospice volunteer for many years, and then switched careers and became a hospice social worker. And he saw the need, even within the context of hospice, staffing is limited and focus is often on palliation of symptoms, but still that piece of really having a presence and holding space for the dying person to explore what they need to, their life meaning, which is often a big thing at the end of life. Was my life meaningful? Do I have regrets? Things like that. That wasn't there. And so he created the end-of-life doula model. And now there are a number of, I think, schools and institutions that teach, and it is worldwide. I don't know how many doulas there are, but I know in my class, there were people from all over the world in the class. And so I think it's slowly gaining ground, and I think it'll become hopefully more and more common and more well-known as we move along.
Thank you.
I do think it's something that is really needed. I mean, one of the things that I'm kind of grappling with now, and John, maybe you're in the same boat, is the isolation of grief in our culture. I have all of these good friends who I know love me, and I'm not angry at them, but so many of my friends just sort of scattered because I don't think they knew what to say. They didn't want to hurt me anymore. They didn't know what to do. And also my family, right? My family, who I love, and I've obviously been working with my grief counselor about this. But when Andrew got sick, they just fled. They were just so scared of what I was going to go through. But they just left me very isolated. And when Shannon was talking about how death used to be more a part of a family's life, there was a process for grieving. There was a process for recognizing people who were grieving. That I think now we just run away from them. And certainly that hasn't been universal, but it's been largely the case that people just don't seem to know what to do. And Shannon, your story about the woman from Croatia that had sort of let people have instructions for how to interact with her while she was dying. That may be something for those of us all to consider about how we would instruct our friends to interact with us when we're grieving. And I think that one of the things that I have to say, it's not easy. I mean, there are several friends where I have tried to give very gentle, clear instructions to. I'd like you to look at old picture books of Andrew. I'd like you to be with me to talk about him. Hasn't really happened. I think because they're just so painful. But that's maybe something to think about, all of us. Is are there books of poetry that would help? Are there talking about like I said, I haven't really been able to open my photo albums because I don't want to do it by myself. It's been hard. So there's maybe sort of a grief plan as well, that acknowledging that death is going to happen and not ignoring that. We can start to think about what might support us in our grief.
Right.
Because we're not alone, right? I mean, we're all grieving. All of us will grieve. And why in our culture, a good life includes grieving. It's not something that went wrong. It's not something you're doing wrong. And I'm just sorry. For me, it's also been isolating. The pandemic has not helped, of course. But Shannon, what would you say about that? About preparing for grief as well?
Right. I think that's a great idea. And unfortunately, people are where they are, and someone else's death probably brings up fears of their own, what's to come and what they may lose. And so it's hard. You can't push people to be where they're not. But at the same time, if you can plan out in kind of a, hey, this is our plan written out, this is what we really want, I think it at least gives people that opportunity, to step into that space and share it with you. I also think it speaks to another really important thing here, is that if we could shift in our culture to having these conversations earlier, when we're younger, getting familiar with things before some tragedy hits. And then it's not unfamiliar when something comes along. It still may be painful and it may be scary, but it's not completely an unknown at that point. And I think I was mentioning to you the other day, one of the things I stumbled across is there's actually something called death cafes. And pre-pandemic, they met in person, and it would be, somewhere in the community, and people would get together and have cake and tea or coffee and just an open forum to talk about death. And no, it's not counseling, it's not therapy, there's no agenda. It's just a space for people to talk about whatever is on their mind. And I really like that idea. I've only been to one so far, but just to help people to, in a safe way, step into that so that they're better prepared when some crisis hits. I think it would be really, really beneficial for everyone.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things that I would like to alleviate is that, that feeling of fear and panic I had at the first, a diagnosis. And, I mean, like you said, I had no idea how I was going to handle this. I mean, during the pandemic, I had to do Andrew's hospice care. I was untrained. I had to figure all of that out. And you're right about, strength comes from places that, I didn't think I could do it, but I did. And so what that became for me was one of the first things that I could sort of actually own as something I was proud of. And that I was able to care for a loved one this way. And it was something that internally to me, I could say, this is something that I can say, I did well. And I think that's that was a tremendous life changer for me when that happened. So I know we're right up against the end of the hour. It always goes way too fast. I will hand it back over to Felix, but I just want to say, once again, I mean, Shannon, thank you for taking time out of your retreat, out of your practice, for sharing all of this, wonderful knowledge and experience. And I hope our paths cross again.
I hope so too. Thank you so much for having me and to be able to be a part of this amazing group. I think it's wonderful what you're doing here.
Felix, would you like to wrap us up? Thank you.
I don't know how. I think we do it the remote daily way. If you feel comfortable switching on your camera and sharing some virtual love by stretching out your hands and sharing some virtual glitter with our guests today, Shannon Swift and Michelle Thaller, for a conversation that I will have to go back to, and the chat that was almost an entirely parallel lesson in how to deal and how to find first steps and how to learn about also a professional way of helping people at the end of life. Thank you, Shannon, for all you do. Thank you, Amanda, for all you do. And thank you, Michelle, for creating this and holding the space here together with us. We admire you so much. And I think you saw in the chat shares on and off camera today what you bring out in all of us. So I wish you, Michelle, a good summer break, and I hope that we can host you and see you and welcome you back as our friend here in the fall. And I wish all of you a good day. John, thank you for sharing this today, and we will think of you, just as Michelle said. And all of you who are grieving or have been grieving, thank you for sharing. And we always give the last word of the hour to our guests. So Shannon, is there anything you would like to share with us? Maybe a personal mantra of yours, maybe an advice for all of us after this hour?
Oh, gosh. I was actually, just as you were talking, thinking about a quote from a famous Buddhist master from the 19th century. He said, "Whatever we wish for ourselves, others all want as much, so act accordingly." As much as we grieve and we fear this, others do too, and we can reach out and help.
Thank you, Shannon. And Michelle, thank you for allowing us to grieve with you and being so amazing about it. Michelle, what is something you would like to leave us with, maybe for the next few weeks until we get the chance to see you again?
Well, I mean, I came at this from the perspective of a scientist where I couldn't figure out, it didn't seem logical that people were denying this. There was so much, why were we all so alone when we're all the same thing? When we all come from the stardust, we know that, we're all these brief little manifestations of what the stardust does before it takes on another form. And, for me, thank you for giving me the chance, all of you out there, to talk. I mean, you've been some of my companions through this, and you've really, really helped me. So it's not so much that I want to offer any advice, but to all of you out there, I want to say thank you. Thank you for letting me talk about this, letting me into your lives, and helping me through this time.
Remote Daily is here for you Wednesday through Friday at 1 p.m.